If you enjoy sci-fi stories, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications.
The methane wind howled through the ruins of Cygnus Base, a sound like a dying beast. Elias Thorne crouched in the skeletal remains of what was once the hydroponics bay, his breath fogging the inside of his helmet. The air tasted of dust and decay, with a faint, sweet undertone he'd come to associate with the local flora, fungi that had devoured the station's plastics and wiring, leaving behind eerily beautiful, crystalline structures that jutted from the walls like frozen coral. His gloved hand brushed against one. It was cool, smooth, and hummed with a low, subsonic vibration that he felt more in his teeth than in his fingers. This was their home now, or the closest thing they had to one. The official mission had been a failure, a ghost story whispered back on Earth. The Erebus had been swallowed by Saturn's storms during its initial descent, and Cygnus Base, abandoned for a century, was now a tomb and a nursery in equal measure. Elias wasn't here for the science reports. He was here for the quiet, or at least the illusion of it. The illusion was shattered by the frantic crackle of his comms. Elias, status report. Now, it was Lena Petrova, the mission's de facto leader, her voice tight, with a familiar, coiled tension. She was always coiled. Still in the hydroponics bay, he replied, his own voice flat. The shrooms are singing their usual song. No sign of the weather. He used the crew's private slang for the primary threat, the reason the Erebus had been lost, and why they were all confined to the station's reinforced core after dark. They called them the Clouds. The official designation was Saturnian atmospheric sentience, a bureaucratic term that did nothing to capture the sheer, predatory wrongness of the phenomenon. The clouds were vast, continent-sized storms that didn't just move, they hunted. They were intelligent, and they seemed singularly focused on eradicating the human presence on Titan. Good, Lena said, but her relief was paper-thin. Get back to the habitation module. We've got a problem. Before he could ask, the line went dead. Elias straightened up, his boots crunching on the grit that covered the floor. The crystalline fungi cast long, dancing shadows in the weak light from his helmet lamp. He moved through the skeletal corridors, past rooms where the ghosts of the original colonists lingered in the form of fungal effigies. Perfect, haunting replicas of chairs and desks, overgrown with the same shimmering growths. It was beautiful and deeply unsettling. He found the others in the Hab module's common room. Jax, the engineer, was hunched over a schematic of the station's atmospheric processors, his face illuminated by the screen's glow. He looked exhausted, the lines on his face deeper than usual. Lena stood by the viewport, staring out at the orange, hazy sky. And Dr. Eris Thorne, Elias's older brother, was staring at a data slate, his knuckles white. "What's the problem?" Elias asked, his gaze settling on Eris. Eris didn't look up. "It's the Erebus," he said, his voice hollow. "Not the ship itself. The black box. The one they recovered from the wreckage." Lena turned from the window, her expression grim. "The one that was supposed to be destroyed. The one that contained the initial sensor logs from the colony's last days." "Exactly," Eris said, finally looking at Elias, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and exhilaration. "The logs are corrupted. Mostly. But there's a fragment. A final transmission. It's not from the colonists." A heavy silence fell over the room. Jax finally looked up from his schematic, his brow furrowed. "From who?" "The Clouds." "No," Eris said, a strange, almost manic smile touching his lips. "From the fungi." The revelation hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Jax let out a short, sharp laugh that had no humor in it. "You're kidding me. The shed skinners? The things that are trying to turn this whole station into a terrarium." "The fungi," Eris corrected, his voice firm. "And they're not trying to do anything, Jax. They are. They've reclaimed the station. They've made it their own. And according to this fragment, they've been doing it for a century." He tapped the data slate. "The transmission is a warning, or a plea. It's hard to tell. It's in a complex biolinguistic pattern, but the translation matrix is working. It says the clouds are not just weather. They're predators, apex predators of the gas giant's atmosphere. And they see us, and the fungi, as invaders. A threat to their food source." "Us? Food source?" Jack scoffed, running a hand over his stubble. "What? Do they eat lightning or something? We're solid matter, Eris. We're not even in their atmosphere." That's the terrifying part, Eris said, his eyes gleaming with a feverish intensity. They don't need to touch us. They manipulate the environment. They create pressure waves, sonic booms, localized temperature drops. They can induce hypothermia in seconds, cause structural failure, trigger avalanches of methane snow. They're weapons, and they're aimed at us. Lena stepped forward, her voice cutting through the tension. So the fungi are our allies. The fungi are survivors. Eris corrected again. They've been here a century longer than we have. They've learned the cloud's patterns. They've adapted. The transmission suggests a symbiosis. The fungi provide a physical anchor, a stable presence the clouds can't easily erode, and in return, they're protected, or at least tolerated. Elias felt a cold knot form in his stomach. This changed everything. The mission parameters, the constant fear, the very nature of their enemy. They weren't just fighting the elements. They were dealing with a conscious, intelligent adversary. And they'd apparently been sharing their prison with another one. So what's the play? Jax asked, his pragmatic tone returning. We can't fight a storm, Eris. We can't even reason with it. We're stuck in this tin can. We don't have to fight it, Eris said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. We have to learn from the fungi. The transmission mentioned a resonance, a specific frequency, a harmonic that the fungi use to communicate with each other, and one that, apparently, the clouds are sensitive to. It's a form of bioacoustic warfare. If we can isolate that frequency, maybe we can use it to jam them, to confuse them, to make them think we're not a threat, or to make them think we're one of them. Lena countered, her skepticism palpable. We're playing with forces we don't understand, Eris. One wrong move, and we could enrage the entire Saturnian system. Or we could find a way to survive. Eris shot back. Lena, we're already dying. Slowly. Every time one of those storms passes over, the stress on the station's integrity increases. It's a matter of time before something critical fails. This is our only chance. The argument hung in the air, a stalemate between caution and desperation. Elias watched his brother, saw the fire in his eyes, the same fire that had driven him to join this fool's errand in the first place. Eris had always been the dreamer, the one who saw wonder where others saw only decay. Now, that wonder was turning into a weapon they might not be able to control. I'll do it, Elias said, surprising himself. All eyes turned to him. I'll go with Eris. Into the fungal gardens. To find this resonance. The fungal gardens were a maze of bioluminescent beauty and treacherous footing. Elias followed Eris deeper into the reclaimed hydroponics bay, the light from their helmet lamps casting long, dancing shadows. The air was thick with the sweet, cloying smell of decay and renewal, and the low, subsonic hum was now a constant, physical presence, vibrating through the soles of their boots. The data slate indicated the strongest resonance signatures are near the primary geothermal vents, Eris explained, his voice echoing slightly in the vast space. The fungi seemed to thrive on the heat and the mineral-rich steam. They navigated through towering stalks of crystalline fungus, some as tall as a man, others forming delicate, lace-like curtains that shimmered with internal light. The structures were alien and beautiful, a cathedral built by an artist who had never seen Earth. Elias's mind kept drifting back to Lena's warning. What were they unleashing? The fungi seemed passive, almost benign, but Eris's theory suggested a cunning, ancient intelligence. They were not just plants. They were architects and warriors. Here, Eris said, stopping in a large cavern-like space. The floor was covered in a thick, spongy moss that glowed with a soft, pulsating blue light. In the center of the room, a massive vent hissed, releasing a plume of steam that smelled of sulfur and ozone. The hum was deafening here, a physical pressure against their eardrums. This is it, the epicenter. Eris pulled a complex scanner from his pack, its multiple lenses whirring as it calibrated. I need to get a reading. A clean harmonic signature. He moved closer to the vent, his focus absolute. Elias stood guard, his hand resting on the grip of his sidearm. A standard-issue plasma pistol that felt woefully inadequate against an enemy made of wind and lightning. He scanned the shadows, his nerves frayed. The silence, broken only by the hiss of the vent and the hum of the fungi, felt more menacing than any overt threat. It was the quiet before the storm. Literally. Suddenly, Eris let out a sharp cry of pain. He stumbled back from the vent, clutching his hand. Eris? What is it? Elias rushed to his side. Eris's glove was smoking, the material eaten away to reveal his skin, which was already turning red and blistering. The steam, he gasped, his face pale. It's corrosive, not just hot. It's acidic. Acidic. Elias stared at the vent. The steam looked normal, but the fungi surrounding it seemed unaffected, their crystalline structures gleaming under the light. The fungi, they're neutralizing it. They're filtering it somehow. That's not in the logs, Eris muttered, pulling off his ruined glove. His hand was a mess of burns. This changes things. The fungi aren't just passive inhabitants. They're actively terraforming this environment. For themselves. The implications were staggering. The fungi weren't just allies. They were the dominant force on this moon. They were the true masters of Cygnus Base, and the humans were merely guests. And guests, as Elias knew all too well, could be asked to leave at any moment. We have to get back to the med bay, Elias said, helping his brother to his feet. Your hand needs treatment. As they turned to leave, a low, guttural sound echoed through the chamber. It wasn't the hum of the fungi. It was deeper, more resonant, and it seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Elias froze, his hand tightening on his pistol. Eris, did you hear that? Eris nodded, his face etched with fear. It's the resonance. The one we were looking for. The sound grew in intensity, a physical force that made the air vibrate. The glowing moss on the floor pulsed in time with it, and the crystalline stalks began to sway as if in a breeze. But there was no wind. The sound was the wind. It was the voice of the storm. The retreat was a panic scramble. The resonant hum from the vent had escalated into a full-throated roar that seemed to shake the very foundations of the station. The crystalline fungi, which had been so serene moments before, now thrashed violently, their sharp edges glinting in the flashing light of Elias and Eris's helmet lamps. They were being buffeted by an invisible force, a pressure wave that slammed them against the walls. The vents. Eris yelled over the din, clutching his burned hand to his chest. The pressure is building. It's going to blow. They stumbled through the fungal jungle, the way they had come now, a treacherous obstacle course of swaying, cracking stalks. Elias half-carried, half-dragged his brother, his own heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. The roar was deafening, a physical assault on their senses. It felt like the station itself was screaming. They burst out of the hydroponics bay and into the relative safety of the reinforced corridor leading to the habitation module. The roar subsided slightly, replaced by a low, ominous hum that vibrated through the deck plates. The lights flickered wildly, casting long, dancing shadows that made the metal walls seem to writhe. What was that? Elias gasped, leaning against the cool metal to catch his breath. The clouds, Eris said, his voice trembling. They know. They know we were here. They know we were probing their territory. They probed us. Asterisk. Jax's voice crackled over Elias's comms. Elias, get back here. Now. The station's integrity is failing. We've lost primary power to the eastern sector. We're on our way, Elias replied, helping Eris down the corridor. We found the resonance. And something else. He explained the acidic steam, the fungi's ability to neutralize it. They're not just passive, Jax. They're active. They're in control. Terrific, Jax muttered. Just what we need. A bunch of alien gardeners with a grudge. When they finally reached the habitation module, they found Lena waiting for them in the common room. Her face was grim, her eyes fixed on a status display. You're late, she said, her voice devoid of its usual sharpness. And the station is falling apart around us. The eastern corridor has completely collapsed. We're cut off from the primary reactor. What? Eris asked, his eyes wide. That's impossible. The eastern sector was reinforced. It was supposed to be the most stable part of the station. Not anymore, Jax said, pointing to a schematic on the main screen. Look at this. The stress fractures are spreading. It's like the metal is rotting from the inside out. Elias stared at the screen, a cold dread washing over him. The pattern of the fractures wasn't random. It was deliberate. It was following the lines of the station's structural supports, targeting the weakest points. It was a surgical, precise attack. The clouds, Lena said, her voice barely a whisper. They're not just throwing a tantrum. They're methodically destroying our ability to survive. And the fungi? Eris began, but Lena cut him off. The fungi are part of it. Or at least, they're part of the problem. They've weakened the station's structural integrity with their growth, making it vulnerable. The storm is just finishing the job. She turned to face them, her expression hardening. Our mission is over. We're evacuating. Evacuating? Jack scoffed. With what? The Erebus is a wreck. Our shuttle is buried under a ton of fungal growth and methane snow. We're trapped. Then we die here. The days that followed were a blur of frantic activity and crushing despair. The core of the station, the habitation module, and the central reactor became their fortress. They sealed off the collapsed eastern sector with emergency bulkheads, the sound of metal grinding on metal echoing through the corridors like the death knell of a giant. The power was rationed to bare minimums, plunging the station into a perpetual twilight, lit only by the emergency strips and the faint, eerie glow from the fungal growths that now crept along the walls like a slow-moving tide. The constant, low hum of the fungi was their only companion, a reminder of the silent, ancient watchers who shared their prison. Lena's authority was absolute, but it was fraying at the edges. She moved through the station like a ghost, her face set in a mask of grim determination, but Elias saw the fear in her eyes, the way her hands trembled when she thought no one was watching. Jax was a whirlwind of frustrated energy, cursing the station's failing systems and the alien shed-skinners that seemed to mock his every attempt to repair them. And Eris was a changed man. The burns on his hand had healed into a nasty scar, but the fire in his eyes had been replaced by a cold, calculating intensity. He spent most of his time in the med bay, not tending to his wound, but hunched over a new schematic, one he'd drawn himself. It was a complex web of lines and frequencies, intersecting with the station's structural layout. "What are you working on?" Elias asked one evening, finding Eris alone in the dimly lit room. Eris didn't look up from his work. "A solution," he said, his voice flat. "A way to fight back." "Lena said we're not fighting back," Elias countered, sitting on the edge of a nearby cot. "She said we're fortifying, surviving." "Lena is a coward," Eris spat, finally looking up. His eyes were wild, feverish. "She wants to hide and wait to die? I won't do that. I've seen what the fungi can do. I've felt the resonance. We don't have to hide. We can turn the tables." "How?" Elias pressed a knot.